So one thing that can be useful in Xano, in fact, in a lot of cases, is being able to iterate over time or iterate over dates, right? So you have a range of, like, I want to know about things that are in, say, the first quarter of 2022, and I want to have one record per day in that range. And this can sort of seem like a weird thing, right? It seems intuitive. You should be able to say start and end, and then just be able to go get all the dates to go along with that. It just takes a little bit of doing, but Xano makes it actually pretty easy. So to test this out, I've created a custom function by going over here to library in Xano and creating function, which I'm calling iterate date range. I set it up with an input of a start and an end that are both of type date. You could set it up as a different kind of thing, of course, but like date is what I'm trying to answer right now. And then things, which I'll get to, just like how we can make it just a little bit more complicated at the end. We can't actually, because it's not directly an array, we can't create a for loop for it, but what we can do is use a while loop to keep iterating over the days from the beginning all the way until the end. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to create a variable called today, which is just initially going to be the start, right? And today is going to be what we're going to keep track of as we're going over the various days in the first quarter. And then we're going to also have an array, which is going to be our output. Right now I'm calling it dates, that we're going to collect all of our results into. And now here's how we create our sort of ersatz for loop. We do it using a while loop. And the way you create a while loop in Xano is you press plus here, you do data manipulation, and you choose loops. And usually in Xano you're doing a lot of for loops, but here you can do something called while. Iterate while the given condition is true. And in our case, the condition that we're going to be checking on is that today should be less than or equal to the end date, right? So if we're going from, say, 1/1 through 3/31, it should include all the dates of 1/1 through 3/31 inclusive. If we want to do it something else, we can do it something else. Of course, you always have the opportunity to be changing up how this operator works. This allows you to do things along the lines of, reversing the list or having non-exclusive or non-exclusive parameters, etc. But I would use today, less than or equal to, that's the one with a little line underneath, and then the end date in order to get that full on range. Great. Now, as long as that is true, of course, if you do nothing else, that will go infinitely, right? Because if today is set to the start, which is January 1st, well, then it's always less than the end date, which would be March 31st, and it will just go on forever and ever and ever. So we introduce this idea of updating the today variable inside the while loop. And here we're going to say take today, and we're going to use a transform timestamp filter, and we're going to format it saying give me one more day, just one more. This will generate a new an actual timestamp variable, which is stored in seconds in Xano. And we'll need to convert that back into the date that we wanted to work with, which we do through format timestamp and YMD. And because Xano thinks in terms of time and not in terms of dates, we just sort of need to go through that little bit of additional ceremony. So we use transform timestamp to add the day, format timestamp to make sure we get it as a date, and we are good to go. The final thing that we want to keep track of is being able to add to the end of basically collect all these days. So this will create a situation where I'm iterating over my loop, and initially it's January 1st. I go to my update, that turns January 1st and January 2nd, start my loop again, I'm at January 2nd, that's still less than March 31st, etc., 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 right? All the way until I get to March 31st, and then that is less than or equal to, great, it turns it into April 1st, April 1st is not less than March 31st, I'm all done, and it continues. Now, the second thing that can be useful here is often we don't just want to iterate over dates. We'd also like to be able to iterate over something that relates to the date, right? Have some sort of internal consideration. So we can nest loops within loops, and here I'm nesting an additional loop of whatever the things were that were asked that we wanted to actually understand about each of these days. So maybe we want to understand about, start and end and like the 3 meals of the day, and you want to have an array that's going to be all of the meals for all the various days, breakfast, lunch, dinner, times the 90 days in the quarter. Well, what this will do is iterate over each of those things inside the day, and then add to the array, okay, well, I want today's date, and I also want whatever that thing is. which could be the breakfast, lunch, dinner, etc. In fact, let's make the meals. Let's see what that looks like. So if what we want to do is generate an array of meals for, say, the first quarter, then we can say, all right, well, let's make this 3/31st. We'll say our things are breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we will now run this. And we will get what we were looking for, I think, which is to say that on January 1st, we will have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. January 2nd, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this will create the 270 elements that we were looking for that are now breaking up a range of dates by knowing the start and the end into the full-on array, and then being able to break it down even further into whatever you might find useful for your application.